Ports are the lifelines of our economies, moving 80% of global trade. But they are also hotspots for emissions, wastes, and habitat destruction, while facing climate risks and other threats. The challenge is urgent, but it's also an opportunity to transform ports into hubs of innovation, efficiency, and resilience. Today, you'll hear from experts from Green Marine, Port of Newcastle, Port Klang Authority, and the Asian Development Bank, sharing solutions for Southeast Asia's resilient ports. The webinar begins shortly. Please stay tuned.
Hi everyone and welcome. My name is Jackie Spiteri and I'll be your moderator for today's session on green and resilient ports, looking at global lessons for Southeast Asia. Ports are the backbone of global trade, and as we saw in the video, they handle nearly 80% of the world's goods, yet they are also the front line of climate risk, facing sea level rise, storm surges, pollution pressures, and growing expectations from regulators, financiers, and the communities in which they exist. The transition to a low-carbon, climate-resilient port operations isn't just about delivering on a sustainability agenda. It's about competitiveness, resilience, and maintaining long-term operational viability. Today's conversation is about practical solutions already being implemented around the world and how we can translate those solutions effectively into the Southeast ASEAN context. The webinar is organised by the ASEAN Catalytic Green Finance Facility, an initiative of the ASEAN Infrastructure Fund. It marks the first instalment in a series designed to spotlight global innovations and spark peer learning among policymakers, port authorities, and industry leaders across the region. Our format today will be 4 focused presentations that will be followed by a moderated discussion, and then also some audience Q&A. So please do upload any questions that you have to the Q&A. I'm pleased to introduce our speakers. First up, we'll have Alison Ryan, Programme Manager at Green Marine, who will show how voluntary environmental certification is driving measurable improvement across more than 70 ports and 60 terminals in North America, Europe, and Australia. Then we'll hear from Ruth Madden, ESG and Sustainability Manager at the Port of Newcastle here in Australia, who will share how one of Australia's largest ports is pursuing decarbonisation, electrification readiness, and operational innovation. We'll then hear from Adrian Salmon, Senior Transport Specialist for Maritime Transport and Ports at the Asian Development Bank. Adrian will connect this to the regional realities of Southeast Asia, highlighting both gaps and emerging opportunities for the region. And finally, we'll hear from Captain Subramaniam Karupa, General Manager at Port Klang Authority, who will discuss how Malaysia's busiest port is embedding sustainability into governance, planning, and day-to-day operations. As mentioned earlier, please feel free to submit any questions that you might have along the way using the QA box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll bring them into the discussion towards the end. On that note, let's begin, and I'd like to invite Alison Ryan, Programme Manager at Green Marine, to kick us off with an overview of the Green Marine certification tool.
Good morning, afternoon, everyone. To everyone joining us today, thank you for being here, and thank you to the organizers for having me here today. I'm very excited to launch today's discussion about green and resilient ports. My name is Alison Ryan. I am a program manager with Green Marine International, which is a nonprofit organization headquartered in Canada, but with staff across Canada, the US, and in France. You'll hear me use Green Marine International, Green Marine Europe, and just Green Marine. So for clarity, Green Marine International is the organization which oversees our Green Marine and Green Marine Europe programs. So to provide some context for the next slides, looking at how we support ports in their endeavor towards being green. Green Marine is a for industry, by industry, fully voluntary environmental certification program that goes above and beyond regulations and is the most comprehensive program that exists for the maritime industry. Launched originally in 2007, this program supports participants from various sectors across the maritime industry, including ship owners, port authorities, terminal operators, shipyards, as well as a Seaway Corporation in Canada and the US. And we support these participants through the provision of sector-specific action plans that address various key issues through 15 performance indicators. These indicators address environmental issues, and have also moved towards the social acceptability and sustainability components as well. Participants of this program or programs undergo an independent verification of their performance against the action plan, and if minimum requirements are met, participants are deemed certified with their performance results publicly reported. So, if we ask ourselves what a green port is, I don't know that any single person will provide the exact same definition or have the exact same perspective of what that looks like. Certainly not across sectors, but likely not even within the same sector. So taking the results from a very quick Google search of the terms that we most commonly see associated with green ports, this is what we get. These are in no particular order, but looking at some of these, we've got circular, clean, mitigation, certification, engagement. I mean, the list goes on. So it's a lot. How does one even begin to piece it all together? Where do you start? Where do you end? Is there an end? My goal today is really to share just some of the work that we do around supporting the greening of ports. Here we have 15 performance indicators that are included in our program. The first iterations of our program had just 6 performance indicators, but now over the course of what is approaching 2 decades, we have more than doubled our scope or our reach. And you can see here, based on the color coding around each icon, the variability that we have between sectors, and you can get an idea of how we've curated the program to address issues that are relevant to each sector, with our ports participants reporting to 9 of these indicators. Our indicators follow a progressive 5-level framework. Level 1 ensures awareness of regulations and implementation of regulatory monitoring processes. Level 2 focuses on implementing industry best practices. Level 3 adds impact measurement and management plans. Level 4 moves to setting reduction targets and engaging in research or pilot projects. And finally, level 5 represents leadership. These are organizations that are achieving their defined targets and driving innovation. Each of these levels builds on the previous, creating a clear, action-oriented roadmap for continual improvement. And I'll dive into just a few of these performance indicators. So these slides give a snapshot of each performance indicator and show last year's results as well for participating ports in the program. So taking community relations as an example, this performance indicator expands our program into the social realm because Green Marine International and our participating ports recognize that social license is as critical as environmental and economic performance. At level 2 here, ports establish open communications with communities and stakeholders. Level 3 formalizes that with strategies and reporting. Level 4 then integrates engagement into corporate strategic planning. And level 5 introduces co-creation, where we encourage working with communities and stakeholders to design and deliver projects together. So looking more at co-creation as an example, unlike traditional consultations that present a pre-designed plan, co-creation starts by identifying all stakeholders and inviting their ideas from the very beginning. So Green Marine International partnered with a number of experts to develop guidelines for co-creation projects, and we launched a pilot initiative, which the Port of Sept-Îles, which is one of our Canadian participating ports, they quickly embraced that. Their project focused on improving public waterfront access, connecting the city's walkway to the cruise dock. So from the outset, they clearly defined the project intent, and they then engaged diverse groups, a large number including municipal leaders, Indigenous communities, environmental organizations, daycares, and even schools that visited the area on occasion. So looking at this inclusive approach really supports the building of trust, it fosters pride, and it strengthens confidence in the port for future initiatives. Our underwater noise indicator, as another example, focuses on managing and reducing noise from ships and port activities to protect marine species. So ports start by building awareness, understanding impacts and reporting marine mammal sightings. They then develop underwater noise mitigation and management plans with clear procedures. They monitor ambient noise and work towards reducing those levels. Beyond that, ports are leveraging the data that they have available for better decision making. They're supporting academic research, they're collaborating with stakeholders, and even implementing incentive programs for quieter vessels. So the Port of Vancouver, which is another of Green Marine's participating ports in Canada, launched their Enhancing Cetacean Habitat Observation Program, or ECHO, over 10 years ago. This program coordinates voluntary seasonal measures to reduce the impacts of commercial shipping on at-risk whales off of British Columbia's southern coast, with a focus on reducing acoustic and physical disturbance from ships. So the port currently has 3 voluntary initiatives, 2 of which are shown here. 2 of those 3 are voluntary ship slowdowns, while the third is a voluntary route alteration. The cumulative percentage rate in these initiatives last year was 85%, with over 70 organizations participating. That translated to more than 5,800 slower or more distanced ship transits within key areas of killer whale critical habitat in the area. This is the newest performance indicator for our participating ports, and it was first introduced in the program 2 years ago. Level 2 here is much about knowledge building and sharing and awareness and education, supporting then the level 3 efforts to identify pollutant sources and conduct ecosystem characterization, for example. At level 4, ports are implementing an aquatic ecosystems monitoring program. They've developed an aquatic ecosystems management plan, among other things, and they expand on monitoring and research investments, for example, at level 5. Highlighting once again the Port of Sept-Îles and their Enviro Actions project this time, which actually addresses various components, including air quality, underwater noise, and more. The port here, in collaboration with a number of other stakeholders, have launched a real-time data collection buoy in the waters of the port, which transmits data in near real time and enables the issuance of alerts where specified limits are exceeded. So overall, with this project, not just this buoy, the goal is to develop a system that enables near real-time environmental monitoring, supporting a global approach to management and further enabling the adaptation of existing protocols. So we're looking at moving towards or enabling management in prevention mode rather than intervention mode. So there's evidently much to be done, and that didn't even scratch the surface. So let's take a few steps back and look at what some key pillars are for ports looking to advance their environmental and sustainability efforts. First, tracking performance with clearly defined indicators is critical. You have to know where you're starting from in order to plan your path forward. There has to be an establishment of trust around what that performance is. How do you demonstrate that it's valid or credible? And how do you then share that performance? There is, of course, a criticality around engagement. Broadly speaking, we're not looking only at how we engage with our direct stakeholders. There has to be an expansion of this engagement to the communities within which we operate, and we need to engage with all of the relevant ecosystems. And last but certainly not least, strong governance and commitment to the principles of being green, to making progress, to becoming more sustainable is foundational. A green port is so much more than compliance. It's about recognizing that there are an incredible variety of opportunities and pathways, old and new, that exist to reduce the environmental footprint and maintain the social license to operate. It's about recognizing that we can continually improve on our efforts, that we need to work together with our stakeholders and communities to maintain healthy relationships and a healthy environment. Where to start will vary for every entity, but the goal of continually improving will drive progress. Don't approach this with a finite end in sight, but instead have a progressive vision to continually move forward. Before I finish up, I will quickly share membership details showcasing the number of ports that you can see in red here across our program. The Australian port on the bottom right was part of our 2024 pilot projects, where we actually assessed the feasibility of implementing this program in other countries with potentially varying regulatory frameworks and requirements. So we had successful pilots in the Bahamas and Mexico as well. If participation in a pilot project is of interest, please feel free to get in contact with me. My details will be at the end. And noting as well that we also have a European program slightly adapted to reflect their regulatory framework. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Alison. That was an excellent presentation, and it really does give us insight into the structure of a green port framework that can be used and really promotes that kind of continuous improvement, enabling broad participation for that. So next, we're going to move over to Ruth Madden, who is the Sustainability and ESG Manager for Port of Newcastle. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Ruth. Thanks, Ruth.
Thanks, Jackie. Okay, thank you for having me today. It's a pleasure to speak today about Port of Newcastle and our journey. So before I start, just want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands and waters on which the Port of Newcastle operates, the Awabakal and Worimi people, and pay respect to all elders past, present and emerging. And I extend that acknowledgement to any Indigenous people on the call today. So a little bit about the Port of Newcastle. We're the largest port on Australia's east coast. So we're about an hour and a half north of Sydney. We've got 21 operational berths with a lot of portside land available for development. And the port's channel is capable of handling more than 10,000 ship movements per year. So last year we facilitated 158 million tonnes of trade, and we're on track to achieve a similar number this year. Here's a map showing the port. As you can see, it is a very large land area. We've got 777 hectares, and we're currently the largest and most efficient coal port in the world, but we also handle a lot of other different types of trade, with almost 5,000 ship movements and a deep water channel only operating at 50% capacity at the moment. We're a values-driven organisation with our core values at the heart of our ESG strategy. So our purpose is clear: to grow what we have, go where we're not, protect what we have, and enable our business to deliver and to integrate ESG into all business decisions to ensure that we've got a sustainable and resilient asset. So we do that through a number of different strategies and initiatives listed there on the screen, through benchmarking, road mapping, setting ambitious targets, transparency in disclosures, and through integration of ESG into all aspects of the business. We've involved our stakeholders throughout with regular materiality assessments, and that's been crucial to developing and updating our ESG strategy. We've also mapped our strategy against the UN Sustainable Development Goals to identify the priority goals having the strongest links to our core business areas and where we'll have the most impact. Transparency and accountability are really fundamental to sustainability. So having those genuine commitments, which require public commitments and appropriate metrics to substantiate any of our performance claims. So each year we prepare and publish sustainability reports against internationally recognised frameworks. We recently updated our ESG strategy, and we've kept it as a dynamic document so that we can update it whenever there is a change in our business. We submit a modern slavery statement each year in accordance with the Modern Slavery Act, and we have an endorsed Innovate Reconciliation Action Plan through Reconciliation Australia. We've measured our emissions profile, Scope 1, 2 and 3, and we've used 2018 as our baseline to set those ambitious targets. We've aligned we've got an approved SBTi target for Scope 1 and 2 emissions, and we're tracking against the 1.5 trajectory. So that's I think it's green or blue. I'm not sure, I might be a little bit colourblind. And we've also got a Scope 3 emissions target, which we've aligned to the SBTi as well. Our net zero target is for 2040, and that includes Scope 1, 2 and select Scope 3 emissions, so those ones that we have more control over. So some of the decarbonisation opportunities that we've already realised at the port that's enabled us to meet our annual SBTi targets, one of those is through our renewable energy contract. So we've committed to sourcing 100% of our electricity through renewable sources, and we've subscribed to a 5-year PPA, power purchase agreement. We're about to sign a new one in October, which will take us up to 2030. So we currently source our electricity through the Badangara wind farm, and that photo there actually shows the wind turbines coming through the port. So it's a nice little circular story there. And we've got an embedded network, which includes our tenants as well as our own usage. So having our tenants and us all on renewable electricity has helped to address Scope 2 and Scope 3 emissions reductions. So that's resulted in approximately 4,867 tonnes of CO2e per year. We're also looking at opportunities for on-site renewable energy generation, so solar panels on our warehouses and battery or BESS systems. So we're looking through the barriers to do that at the moment. Some of them are around our HV network and some upgrades that need to be done. But once we've done that, then we'll be able to start doing this on-site renewable energy generation as well. We've transitioned our vehicle fleet to electric, and that's resulted in emissions reduction of 48 tonnes of CO2e per year. And we've also seen a bit of an economic benefit there by having an annual fuel savings of around $20,000. And to support that transition, we've also installed a number of charging stations around the port. We've got 6 in our head office, and we've got 2 fast charging stations in the operational port area. So the idea there is to not only charge our own vehicles, but for allow any of the other port users to also use that and enable electrification for them too. In 2021, we purchased a sweeper vessel, the Lydia. That's in addition to our maintenance operations to enhance the capability and efficiency of our dredging operations. So the purpose of a sweeper vessel is to level out the peaks and troughs. And by doing that, there'll be a reduction in the amount of spoil material that needs to be removed from the harbour to maintain those required depths. So the Lydia sweeper will help to abate the Scope 1 emissions from our dredge, which really is the bulk of our emissions profile now. We've upgraded all of our lighting to LED, which has seen a reduction in energy use, electricity use, and some real efficiency gains there through that project. There's a couple of photos highlighting some of those LED lights. And we've also purchased 2 mobile harbour cranes as part of our diversification strategy for our Mayfield precinct. The cranes were originally purchased as hybrid electric, running on diesel, and they ran on diesel for the first few years while we ran into some issues with electrification processes. That was mainly due to issues with our network provider, but this year we were able to fully electrify those mobile harbour cranes. So it's important to understand that Port of Newcastle has an existing diversified trade base with 25 separate lines of trade. So in addition to coal, we already handle a number of other commodities such as cement, metal, alumina, coke, magnetite, sand, and fertiliser. We've also recently seen an increase in the number of wind turbines that are coming through the port, and that's really largely down to the significant land that we have available to efficiently stage the transportation as they leave the port. It requires a lot of space, which is something that we have. Additionally, we handle agri-bulk machinery via roll-on, roll-off, break bulk, steel, metals, forestry products, containers, and general cargo. So it's this existing diversified trade base that we want to build upon and expand as we seek to position ourselves to have a sustainable asset into the future. And as you can see here, we're focused on diversification to ensure that long-term sustainability. And here's our 3 major projects that we're working on to enable that diversification. With Clean Energy Precinct, the roll-on, roll-off terminal, and the multi-purpose terminal. We're also looking to increase agricultural exports like cotton and grain, which are a central focus. And our connection to the rail network gives us a unique connection with the state's producers of those commodities. So Port of Newcastle's balanced approach really allows us to support traditional industries as we develop new opportunities that will provide a sustainable economic future for our community. So this is an artist's impression of our Clean Energy Precinct when it will be fully developed. It's full steam ahead, the most advanced of its kind in Australia. The Clean Energy Precinct project supports the New South Wales Government's objective to accelerate decarbonisation and clean energy opportunities by increasing renewable energy generation, storage and investment. So it also supports the build out of renewable energy zones in the area by creating a large electrical load demand at the port. From a national level, the Clean Energy Precinct will also help Australia to meet its emissions reductions targets, which is a reduction of 43% below 2005 levels by 2030. And most recently, the government has announced some further ambitious targets in emissions reductions there. So these types of projects are going to go a long way in helping that. Locally, we've also got the potential to leverage our existing workforce in the Hunter by creating opportunities for those workers that are currently in the coal industry. The Clean Energy Precinct there, when it will be produced, it's on a former waste emplacement facility that's been remediated for industrial purposes. So the substation and switchyard will pick up electricity from the Transgrid network, which in turn will be fed by projects from the renewable energy zone. So it will be fully green sourced. Water will be coming from the project's own recycled water and demineralisation plant, which will take treated wastewater from treatment plants without any impact to the fresh water for the region. Water and electricity will also be used for electrolysis to produce hydrogen, which will then be turned to liquefied ammonia for storage. And the Clean Energy Precinct will have an export pipeline to load the liquefied ammonia into specialised ships that will be used for export internationally. And as you can see from this map, the port's conveniently located in the middle of a wide array of clean energy initiatives in New South Wales. So it's surrounded by the renewable energy zones, hydrogen and energy hubs, firm capacity generators, and well-established industrial energy consumers. And most importantly, future initiatives for the production and export of ammonia and hydrogen. So thanks to its location and capabilities, the Clean Energy Precinct will provide land, utilities, storage, transport and export infrastructure to many of these initiatives, projects and existing clients. So another one of our diversification opportunities is the container terminal that's located on the former BHP Steelworks site at our Mayfield precinct. Again, this is an artist impression of what the container terminal will look like once it's been developed. It's proposed to be a fully automated terminal with a lot of capability there, and again, an opportunity to diversify from our reliance on the fossil fuel industry. So sustainability is a really important part of our business, and ESG is embedded into all aspects of our business. And we have opportunities to diversify our business to reduce our dependence on the coal trade with a port that's only operating at 50% capacity. So that's just a little snapshot into what we're currently doing. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions or connect with me on LinkedIn.
Ruth, thank you so much for an excellent presentation. It was great to get insights into some of the amazing things that the Port of Newcastle are doing as part of its diversification and sustainability commitments. There are a few questions popping up in the chat, so if you do want to respond to those as we go, that would be fantastic. But thank you so much, Ruth. So now moving on to our next speaker, we've got Adrian Salmons from Asian Development Bank joining us just to start bringing through that regional perspective. So Adrian, I'll hand over to you as you're ready.
Thank you, Jackie. It's great to be part of the inaugural rollout of ADB's Green Port strategy in collaboration with the ACGF finance facility. So what I thought was listening to the other panelists today and speakers, which presented their positions and operational activities, is to just discuss the elements as to what has driven ACGF and ADB to collaborate for developing a Green Port strategy and culminating into a Green Port toolkit. So move to the next slide, please. The first consideration is that the purpose of the initiative is to identify and promote the planning of low carbon and sustainable infrastructure solutions, and to strengthen the framework, the information framework that the toolkit will be developed around. The support for the Green Ports focus will be through the environmental and social impacts to boost resilience and improve energy efficiency. Next slide, please. So the importance relative to our initial conference, which will roll out in Singapore, being co-hosted by Infrastructure Asia, Singapore-based government organisation, and ADB, will be to focus on the importance of the green port activity in Southeast Asia in particular. As economic gateways, ports in Southeast Asia are of critical concern, and our inaugural presentation and conference will be hosted there, with several speakers, both globally as well as Southeast Asian operations, of which we've got Port Kelang Authority with us today that will present the case and the activities relative to their operation there. Next slide, please. So the focus from the next phase of the development is to engage a consulting firm that will further investigate and research the elements required for developing a Green Ports toolkit. And the framework for this is derived from assessing the need to elaborate further on the requirements of gathering a consensus view on what a successful green port is, and some of the elements were discussed previously for the last two excellent presentations. Next slide, please. Yeah, so just building on that theme of the toolkit development, which is the part of the phased Green Ports strategy. So unlike the maritime shipping, which is regulated on a global basis and derives a National Maritime Organization, that deliver mandates for transfer into national laws and regulations of the member states. There isn't a similar arrangement governing ports. Thus, a toolkit with acting as a guiding document and bringing together various components of key compliance regimes from around the world, as well as lessons learned and activities relating to best practices, both operationally and governance, and resilience and sustainability within the maritime sector. And so the toolkit will bring all those elements together and provide a working document and be an open access, free of charge for obtaining those guiding principles and processes, and it to be a living thing. So it'll be developed on a continuous basis A few years ago, Asian Development Bank developed a similar toolkit for roads, and the Green Roads Toolkit was delivered a few years ago, and maintains a high recognition, both from a planning, constructability, through to the operations, renewals, maintenance, through to end of life and recreation of roads and highways and bridges. So the Green Ports Toolkit will parallel that, and of course, be focused on the requirements relative to both the operations, governance, as well as bringing elements of compliance here. Next slide, please. So some of which I just discussed, but the elements that we heard today from the past speakers was that there is various strategies being developed by the individual ports to suit their own national law and state laws and regulations and requirements, and then elaborating on those and stretching further into their own ESG environments and delivering further gains on various activities and what they see as needs tend into both the operations and governance and also community aspects of operating ports. We also heard on the compliance and certification, of which is a critical component relative to national laws and host governments, that the regulators require certain compliance regimes. And the certification stretches to those levels, but also above and beyond. And there is the UN SDGs, which provide a framework for establishing certain criteria around matching some of those guidelines. But yet the certifiers have developed ways to include those as well as blend with the national laws and regulations. So this is an evolving scene, which obviously changes from place to place, and other actors involved in the port space relative to the greening and resilience and environmental sustainability of the operations and running a port are the various ports associations around the world. Again, the need for a combined guiding document or guiding facility that brings in all of those elements and includes those and blends those into a single guiding document would be to incorporate some of the knowledge aspects of some of the ports associations, which also have established awards regimes whereby they use their own critical regional thinking to benchmark various success levels. So next slide, please. So ADB, as being a bank, is ultimately focused on providing technical services and support for its developing member countries, and in doing so, that culminates in financing certain activities and certain infrastructure and developments, and the Green Ports component falls into that. Where opportunity presents for this, and the developing member countries request assistance, both technical support as well as organizational and institutional support, and beyond, perhaps infrastructure development and superstructure and planning, then ADB is established to provide those services both on a sovereign basis, as a government lender, as well as the ADB has a private sector development organisation that blends financing to the private sector as well. Next slide, please. Yeah, won't dwell too much on this, but you know, the target audience and the budgets are established for these things. Next slide, please. So, in closing, this is a first webinar that we hope has been of value, and we'd love to receive some of your questions at the end, and will be one of many. And we'll initiate certain deliverables of a series of knowledge knowledge products with the webinars, as well as blogs to carry forward with selected speakers and experts, and from both the private sector and public sector. So I'll close there and pass back to Jackie. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Adrian, for that. That was a fantastic presentation and a really great insight into the scope of work that ADB have got planned to support ports on their green port journey as we start to transition towards a more sustainable green port environment. So thanks so much for that, Adrian. I can see lots of questions coming through on the chat, so thank you to everyone for that. Keep those coming. We are answering them as we're going. I will now hand over to a regional case study. So we talked earlier about it being a continual improvement journey, and we've certainly got a case study here in the region where there's some great things happening. So I'd like to hand over to Captain Subramaniam at Port Klang Authority to take us through his presentation today. Thank you, Captain.
Thank you, Jackie. Good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to have such a distinguished group of people here this afternoon.
You're just on mute, Captain. Just need to take you off mute for again.
Sorry about it. Okay. Just a little bit of background about Port Klang. We are the largest and busiest port here in Malaysia. We are actually quite an old port. About 100 years ago, this place was set up at the river mouth of the Klang River. So you can imagine some of our facilities are not that recent, and so there is a great challenge for us to move up towards ensuring that our equipment and our facilities are up to date, especially being according to the green port concept elements. We have over 16 kilometers of berth line. We also have a couple of projects that are ongoing now to add another 5 kilometers of berth. We predominantly handle containers. 80% of our throughput is through containers, while the other 20% is covering general cargo, break bulk, dry bulk, as well as ro-ro traffic. And we do have a dedicated cruise terminal as well. We are located at the central part of the Straits of Malacca, the busiest channel in the world. Over 80,000 vessels transit the straits every year, so you can imagine how busy this area is. And last year we did about 14.6 million TEUs of containers with over 240 million tons of cargo. So just like any other ports in the world, we are pursuing our various efforts to green our port and move up towards a higher level of sustainability. I'll go straight to the slides now. The first slide is just to give us an idea of how important ports are to the world's economy. We know 80% of our goods are transported via maritime channels, and that means via shipping. And that too means that we in the ports are the interface for cargo exchange between the ship and the shore. And looking at the major trade routes around the world, we do have issues in moving goods. We had a lot of problems during the COVID, but then we were expected to keep the ports open and ensure the shipping lanes are open and the shipping services are open. In terms of global container movements, in 2024, we recorded about 937 million TEUs, while global trade in 2024 itself was worth some $33 trillion. That's how important maritime trade is and how important ports are. Next, please. Just as what Adrian mentioned just now, I think the shipping sector is very well regulated through the one of the United Nations agency, the International Maritime Organization. And IMO is very clear about the expectations and the deadlines, as well as the regulations that are being formulated to ensure that shipping actually move towards a cleaner and more sustainable environment. However, the same cannot be said for ports. And I totally agree with what Adrian mentioned just now. We need to have forums such as this to bring ports together, to exchange information, as well as try to get some sort of benchmarking with the best standards globally. I think this is what's expected. Otherwise, we will be struggling to do what we think is best, but not really realizing the best output. So generally, IMO has come out with several indicators. As you see, if we for the cleaning for the shipping sector to be cleaned up, we are looking at a 20 to 30% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, and that means there will be a reduction of the use of fossil fuels as well. And finally, there is an expectation of at least a 5% of such energy be converted to clean marine fuels. So if that happens by 2030, then we will see a reduction of about 40% of carbon emissions. But the ambition, of course, is to go further than that. By 2040, reduction of 70 to 80%, and by 2050, a net zero emission of carbon. So while the port and shipping industry contributes 6% of the world's carbon emissions in 2024, which translates to close to about a billion tons of CO2, I think we in the ports especially are getting our act together, at least on our part, to ensure that the initiatives they are putting in place are going to be effective. So generally, we're looking at energy conservation, emission control, waste management, and cleaner fuels. Next, please. So Malaysia, we are not immune to any of these requirements. We have a national policy on climate change, and we have recently revised that policy to actually accelerate the decarbonization of the various industries here, including the port industry. And the promise is to reduce carbon intensity by 45% throughout by 2030. And that is actually translated into a few action plans, including the National Transport Policy, the Green Port Policy, the Low Carbon Mobility Blueprint, as well as the National Energy Transition Roadmap. Next, please. So in Port Klang, if I could just share some of the initiatives, this are not exhaustive, but I must say, as I mentioned just now, this is an old port. We have structures that were built some 50, 60 years ago, which are still standing. So it's going to be a challenge to replace those structures with less carbon intensity. But what we are heading now is we are converting many of the rooftops on our warehouses. We've close to about 15 million square feet of warehouse space whose rooftops can be converted to be used for solar energy itself. So that's taking place at the moment. Secondly, on biodiversity, waste management is one critical area that is getting a lot of attention now. Not just shore waste, also waste from ships. In line with the MARPOL Convention, the port is obliged to produce or provide facilities in the port to handle waste generated from ships. And we have in Port Klang a couple of facilities that are able to receive such waste. We have also embarked on LNG bunkering. Although we do not have LNG supply here in Port Klang, but we do produce a lot of LNG from another part of Malaysia, which is on the eastern part in the state of Sarawak. And the area is known as Bintulu. They are actually the fourth largest exporter of LNG. And we are tapping the product from Bintulu to be sent over here for LNG bunkering. And we have had a couple of exercises with ships, successful. But it's always a challenge when you are doing LNG bunkering while the ships are alongside and working cargo as well. So simultaneous operations are what's required by shipping lines, because shipping lines don't want to separate the process of handling cargo and then spending more time in port just to do the bunkering. So what we are doing now is moving towards simultaneous operations, and the trials are on the drawing board, and we should be getting them off the ground soon. We are blessed with a huge area of mangrove forests around the port area. High up on our agenda is to preserve such habitation, and we have addressed this, even though we have to replace some of these areas with port development and maritime activity, other maritime activities. But there is a policy in place that we need to replace such mangroves that are taken up for port development and maritime industry in a alternate area. On moving towards facilities for shore power for ships, we have planned for this in our new port development that is taking place right now. There will be Westport 2, where shore power will be provided at berths for ships that are able to plug in and tap power from the shore. Next, please. On cargo operations, yes, we are starting to electrify most of the equipment, especially the rubber-tired gantries, and also on the prime movers and the terminal tractors that we are using for operations in the port. The replacement plan has started. This will be ongoing for the next 10 years. Also for vehicles that are used around the port, whether it's automobiles, motorcycles, or any petrol vehicles, it's all on EVs now. Next, please. Yeah, I think that's all that I can share about Port Klang. I hope it's just given you a brief introduction of what we're trying to do, but I totally agree with some of the speakers who spoke earlier. It's a huge challenge for us now in Port Klang especially, to really embark on this on a well-planned manner. As what we heard earlier, we have started it, but really we need to have a clear direction on how to move this. And certainly, as Adrian said, if we have a reference document on best practices and what really works well in other places, it'll be good for us to actually emulate them and implement them here in our ports as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Captain Subramaniam. That was a fantastic presentation and really good to get some insights into what your organisation is doing in this space. We will bring all of our panelists back onto camera now. We do have a couple of minutes left just to run through some questions, so we'll give them a moment to come back on. But we've got some questions in the chat that have been answered, but there's a couple there, and I'll start with those rather than the questions that I had, because it'd be good to respond to your questions. So I think the first one, we might stick with Captain Subra, if that's okay. From a regional perspective, it would be great to understand what you see as the major challenges, but also the drivers for developing a green and resilient port. So that's a question that we've got in the chat from Nathaniel there to Captain Subra. Are you just on mute still? Sorry.
Sorry, I'm unable to see the question. Could you just read the question?
Yeah, of course. What are the major challenges and drivers for developing green and resilient ports?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier during the presentation, we are quite an old port. We have facilities that are close to about 40, 50 years. Of course, as we go forward on new development, on new infrastructure, we have already planned for those infrastructures to be on low carbon basis. But the older ones, the replacement of the older ones is a bit of a challenge. It takes a bit more time. It's an operational area. When it comes to an operational area, we will need to ensure that we will be able to carry out operations as well, and any shutdowns will have to be minimized. Secondly, we are also looking at financial constraints. We need to be savvy about the way we prioritize our development. And of course, we want to do everything quickly, but it has to be in a manner that is sustainable to us financially. So there is a lot of assistance now coming from the government itself to induce such low carbon development and even replacement of assets. So I think these are the two major challenges that we are facing today, but there are no excuses. I think we will continue with our efforts to ensure that we move towards green and sustainable ports.
Thank you so much, Captain Subra. And yes, it really is a challenge kind of balancing that kind of environmental, social, economic outcomes, but sounds like you're looking at the right areas. We did have a question that I was going to pass to Adrian, but it looks like he might have just dropped out momentarily. He is having some Wi-Fi challenges, so we'll give it a moment for him to pop back in. And in the meantime, I might throw the next question over to Alison. I know that you and Ruth have both been busy in the chat responding to lots of questions, so sorry to throw another one at you. But what do you think, what kind of sort of lessons from, the ports that you work with in North America and Europe are most relevant to the ASEAN ports? What do you think be a kind of key takeaway from the ports that you work with for the ASEAN ports online today?
Yeah, I think that the important message is starting with a structure, having your baseline assessments in place, having your stakeholders engaged from the onset of whatever it is that you're working on. and having a framework that builds credibility, because we have such a variety of, and I think I saw it in one of the questions that was asked, but we have such a variety of regulatory frameworks that exist globally. And it's a real challenge to navigate how to effectively sort of make progress amongst the variety of regulatory frameworks that we have. So I think having sort of that collaborative mindset, not being hesitant to sort of reach out and seek knowledge sharing, will provide sort of that foundational baseline to move in the right direction.
Thanks, Alison. That's a great answer and a great takeaway for those online today. Adrian is back online, so I will ask him to respond to Robert Brown's question, which is, will the Green Port Toolkit include objective criteria for green finance?
I think in the fullness of time, we will adapt it to the requirements for financing of certain components. And so the answer is yes. But there's a long way to go relative to this. Is our very first webinar, and we're having our first conference, Greenport Clinic in October this month, 16th and 17th in Singapore. And also we need to understand from the stakeholders what their requirements are. And this is just opening the first page. Considering there hasn't been attempts to do this before, so we're blazing a trail with this. But as you've heard from the people in the room today, there's a wealth of knowledge and experience and understanding which is developing, and which further needs to be unlocked, to create such a specific instrument to guide this. So the answer is yes, but with a significant asterisk behind that, as a necessary thing, necessary elements to to create a pathway before we create parameters around the financing components for it. Yeah, I hope that answers your question, Robert. Over.
Thanks, Adrian. Appreciate that. And I'm conscious of time, so I might just wrap up with one final question for Ruth. If you had to share one key takeaway for ports in Southeast Asia to become greener and more resilient, what would that be from your experience?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that establishing that baseline and really measuring your profile and doing those materiality assessments to really work out what's going to have the biggest impact for your stakeholders and what's the most important thing, where are you going to make the most impact. So, the old expression, what is measured is managed. I think that's really important to firstly make sure that you've got all those measurements in place, but also, understand what is really important and where are you going to make the biggest impacts.
Couldn't agree more, Ruth. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of our presenters today. It's been an excellent discussion and some really insightful presentations. I recognize there's still a few questions in the chat that did go unanswered, but that's just a great representation of the interest that we've sparked here. So we will be running another webinar in November, and this one will be focused on decarbonisation in ports. So please keep your eye out for that webinar, and we look forward to seeing you online in the not too distant future. And thank you again to all of our panelists and to our attendees that joined to listen in today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.